Okay, how am I going to say this? Okay, well, I'm going to talk about this and I'm going to say that.
As we were talking about our respective scenes that we worked on this week, we realized that we were experiencing what we're calling conversational chess and mental whiplash.
So the scene that I've been working on, we did talk a little bit about last week, but it's where Arnold, our character, is talking with his best friend Reese about an interaction that he had recently.
And then the scene that I was working on was when Vanessa was talking to her foster mother, Mrs. Diller, and just going through that experience, trying to figure out what would this conversation look like. I'm not going to necessarily talk about what that conversation was, but as I was trying to write the scenes, I found myself starting to get into Vanessa's head to figure out how is she going to respond to this opportunity. Then she will say or do something, and then I had to figure out, well, how is Mrs. Diller going to respond to that? I haven't spent nearly as much time thinking about Mrs. Diller and her character as I have thinking about Vanessa and hers. And what I found is I would really immerse myself into Vanessa's character. How is she going to respond? What is she going to say? How is she holding herself? What is she doing? What's she feeling? She'll react. And then I have to emerge from Vanessa's character and then immerse myself into Mrs. Diller's. And there's a lot that I just didn't really even know about how Mrs. Diller is thinking. What's she feeling? How is she likely to respond? But this back and forth of, okay, now I have to become Vanessa. Now I have to become Mrs. Diller. Back and forth. That's where I felt what I was calling mental whiplash.
And with my scene, it was a little bit easier for really two reasons. One of those being we have a little bit more of Reese's character down than I think we do of Mrs. Diller's. For her, she's a little bit up in the air. You're still trying to figure out what she's like, what her motivations are. Whereas for Reese, we do have a little bit more of that down. And then the other reason being Arnold and Reese are much more alike than Vanessa and Mrs.
Yes.
Diller. So going from one character's mind to the other character's mind is not nearly as much of that mental whiplash. It's a whole lot easier to transition from inside the mind of Reese to inside the mind of Arnold and vice versa, just because those characters have so much in common.
And as I was experiencing that, it reminded me of something that I had read, advice for beginning writers like us. And it was, don't bite off more than you can chew. Don't overextend yourself by trying to create scenes with large numbers of characters. Limit it to just two, especially as a beginning writer, because you're going to find that hard enough. And as I was listening to that advice, I didn't understand why. What's so hard about just adding more people? And then this weekend, I started to experience that mental whiplash, and I realized there is some good advice there. It really is hard just to. I did introduce a third character into the scene, but all he's doing is standing in the doorway and looking. And even that was enough to introduce a little bit more mental whiplash.
Because even if he's not talking, he's still reacting at least a little bit, and you have to figure out that. And then how Mrs. Diller is responding to Vanessa and to the new character. There's
Right.
Makes it even more complicated.
Right.
But as you mentioned, conversational chess, figuring out what is this person going to do? What is that person going to do? And I think that's something that we experience in real life as well. When you're anticipating an important conversation coming up, you're like, okay, how am I going to say this? Okay, well, I'm going to talk about this and I'm going to say that. And then this person could respond this way. They could also respond that way. And if they do this, then I'll respond with this. And you're kind of like planning out the next move, almost like you're playing chess, trying to figure out what's the best move now based on how I think things are going to play out moving forward. An example of that in my own life, somewhat in the past several months, I guess. I was planning on having a conversation with my boss about a potential promotion and figuring out, okay, how am I going to broach the topic? If he says this, what am I going to say? How am I going to present my ideas to him in a way that can be convincing? And if he responds this way, what do I say? So conversational chess in real life, I think, can be helpful in learning how to do it with writing as well, figuring out what your characters are going to say.
And like you, I've had a very similar situation. Every time there's a new service that I'm looking to offer in my business, that first sales conversation, trying to interest somebody in that service, thinking about, okay, what if they say this, if they say that, that whole conversational chess just really plays out. So our question for you this week is, when have you experienced a conversational chess moment? Leave a little story in the comments, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.